To be honest, always keep forgetting.
President of Media and President of Sports and Media Operations.
Thank you so much. It's a very long title, Kevin. I apologize. We will just open it up with some quick thoughts from Pádraig and Kevin, and then we will open it up to questions here in the room. And then we do have some folks online on Zoom. So once everybody asks a question in here, we will let the folks on Zoom ask their questions.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Gabby. Yeah, I guess first of all, just welcome to everybody. Like, delighted so many of you could join us in person. I believe we've got almost a record number on Zoom as well. So thrilled that so many of you are here today. I'm delighted, obviously, that we're joined by Kevin. I think it's his first opportunity to meet with many of you. So big step for us as a club. Very excited about that. And yeah, looking forward to hearing what you all have to say. But turn it over to Kevin.
Oh, it's great to get to do my first chat with all of you. Usually I like to do it after like big wins or something, pretty easy. But end of the year works as well. And excited to get rolling. But I appreciate everybody coming today and good chance to connect.
Matt Pollard, are we on? Can they hear me? Okay. Matt Pollard, Burgundy Wave. Pádraig, good to see you again. Kevin, nice to finally meet you in person. I've got two unrelated questions for both of you. First, Pádraig, we have a good understanding of what the club liked about Chris, what Chris liked about being at the club, what in the negotiations led to kind of a mutual decision that this wasn't a relationship that you wanted to continue. And then, sorry for my voice. I'm going with a little bit I'm questionable right now vocally. We'll see how I do on the podcast. And you can hear me now in the room. That's great. Kevin, you have a history of delivering on sports construction. I would say sports adjacent construction at your other different roles. There's a lot that's been made of Victory Crossing, the scoreboard, as I'm sure you're aware, other infrastructure here at Dick's. What in your time and your current role here can Rapids fans expect from an infrastructure standpoint at the club? Thank you.
All right, well, I guess I'll kick it off since that was the first question. Yeah, look, Chris had a really nice run here, I would say. I think back to 2024, obviously the team coming off a very, very poor 2023 season. And I think he re-established a few things that we were very much looking for at the time. And I think chief amongst that was his relationship with the players, which I think was very, very strong. And we ended up having a terrific year in 24, back into the playoffs, got the Rocky Mountain Cup back onto the right side of the Rockies, which was huge for us. And then that terrific run in Leagues Cup as well, which obviously secured Champions Cup qualification. So we were pleased with that. Obviously not pleased with how the season tailed off at the end, or the playoff run. We felt that there was a little bit more in it. And I think this year was just up and down. It was up and down throughout the season. But we felt good. We felt strong. We felt like we were, very much on a playoff run. And then again, unfortunately, had that tail off at the end of the season where, the last few games were disappointing from our perspective. And as we look at it, we dropped 21 points from a possible 36 against teams that didn't qualify for the playoffs. And I think that was a big marker for us because the opportunity to gain just one more point and qualify for the playoffs, that was obviously there. But we look at it in a much bigger way than that. When you drop 21 points from games against teams that are outside the playoffs, that's an opportunity to really succeed, to push on, to be a kind of a top team in this league and challenge for the things that we really want to challenge for. So I think we had the conversations with Chris around the mid-season or in the summer. They didn't kind of come to a good conclusion at that point in time, and we all agreed to park it until the end of the year. And then when we got to the end of the year, it just hadn't gone the way we wanted, and ultimately made the decision that this is where we were going.
I'm a complete 180 question from that, right? So it's I don't even know how you follow that up. I think
That's my fault.
one of the benefits we have at KSC is truly this expertise in both, hopefully, sports teams as one of the world's largest sports enterprises and one of the world's largest real estate enterprises, and where the intersection of those fall ultimately is how do you develop venues that fans enjoy, the teams compete in, and then ultimately translate that into building an ecosystem around that from a real estate perspective that truly makes it a great destination for fans and drives value. But I think it always starts with whether it's SoFi Stadium, whether it's Ball Arena, whether it's Emirates, or whether it's Dick's Sporting Goods Park. It is making sure that you get the fan experience correct so that you get fans in the building, making sure you put a product on the field that fans enjoy to build that excitement. And then once you have those ingredients, making sure you build around that to take advantage of what you've built inside. It always starts with the stadiums and the buildings themselves, making sure that those are fan-friendly, that those are differentiators for the club, that you get a home field advantage, and ultimately use that to drive the energy and excitement into a mixed-use district. And I think when it comes to specifically Victory Crossing, as you look at what we're doing here, it is part of a larger real estate play when you look at where it's surrounding. And you can look to the east, you can look to the south, you can see where things are starting to abut into Commerce City and say, hey, the growth is coming. What that plan is partly a factor of what makes sense from a real estate perspective, what makes sense, ultimately from a Denver perspective, then how do those fit together? And I think when you look to me at Victory Crossing and some of those plans, when you start to look at, and I can say this from SoFi Stadium, even River Mile, what people looked at pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, and the density, the mix, and how those grows is ever changing. And so I think from a real estate perspective, and it's probably a great question for Mike Neary and Matt Mahoney, my counterparts, at KSE, what makes sense to build for Victory Crossing that is supportive of what we're doing here? But I think it also starts, quite frankly, how do we get more events in this building, right? If you want to truly get it, it can't just be 18, 19 matches. What does the calendar look like from an MLS perspective? How do we get more concerts? How do we get more events? But I truly think this can still be a great destination for soccer and a great opportunity for us to go build up around it, but it is a long-term play.
Brandon Nurse with the Denver Post. Kevin, it's good to meet you. How involved will you be with the search for the next head coach? And for both of you guys, what are some of the qualities that you're looking for in a new coach, and what can you learn from Chris's tenure going into this search?
I think my role here, same with all the clubs, is to be supportive of the group, help ask the right questions, help vet the list, and ultimately help Porg and the entire organization, along with ownership, come to the right decision. And so do I plan to be involved? Yeah, I certainly plan to make sure that we identify what is the right fit and profile for the Rapids as we move forward. Right from there, it's up to Porg and the sporting side and the team to say, here are the correct candidates. I promise you I couldn't identify who those candidates are, but the same way, sadly, when you do this job, you go through plenty of these. And fortunately, in the NFL, we haven't gone through one in a while since we hired Sean, but we just went through one of these in the NBA, a few months ago with David, and I think we're all excited about how that's turned out. But I do think one of the nice things that you've seen, certainly, and I think this is one of those DNA profiles from KSE, is what has become the KSE standard for a head coach. I think when you look, whether it's Sean McVay, Mikel Arteta, David Adelman, Jared Bednar, they all share similar characteristics. Really, their first opportunity to lead a club, that we go and bet on them, that we bet on their growth, we bet on their development, that you want to go build up your own homegrown coach as a star, right? That their equity comes from developing your club, your organization, and being part of KSE, rather than borrowing on previous equity somewhere else. That's not to say that you wouldn't hire someone who's been a previous head coach. But I think when you look at where we've had success is identifying those traits and empowering them to go lead and get that opportunity. And we've had success too with whether it's Michael Malone. It's not just limited to, hey, this is the profile. But I think as we look, and as Porg and I have talked, we know what has worked at KSE throughout the system. We know throughout our resources how we identify coaches, the questions to ask, what to look for, and then once they're here, how to help them succeed. And I think that's really from an organizational standpoint what we can bring, which is a 30,000-foot view of what has been successful for us. And then I think it comes down to Porg and his group identifying the people who fit those traits and us moving forward together.
Yeah, and that's hugely exciting from our perspective. Being able to lean on that kind of expertise and that experience in doing this across the other teams is something we're really, really excited about. I think in terms of your second question, there's a lot of what Chris had that we'd like to keep. Obviously, I think the way he built relationships with the players was very strong, in particular at the outset. That was a real positive. I think there's no doubt, though, that to reach the levels that we want to reach, we need somebody who can drive those standards even higher, and hold that entire area, that entire locker room accountable for what we're trying to achieve. And then I think on top of that, there's the kind of tactical expertise that we're looking for to take this to the next level as well. Spoke earlier about dropping 21 points from those games against non-playoff teams. We're seeing a pattern here, especially when we play at home. Teams that want to come in, sit deep against us, and really not play a proactive game. And that was a struggle for us. And I think we need to elevate in that area in particular to make sure that as Kevin spoke about earlier, that Dick's Sporting Goods Park is a fortress for us the way it should be. And we want to win, the vast majority of our games. No reason why we shouldn't be winning 11, 12 games here at home every season. So I think it's a combination of those things that we're going to be looking for in the next head coach to make sure that they can deliver on what we're looking to build here.
Thank you. We will take a question from the Zoom from Alex Labadou at goal.com.
Hey, Hey everyone, nice to talk. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yeah.
Awesome. Nice to meet both of you. Sorry I couldn't be there today. Quick question for you. With the World Cup coming up next year, how important is that to your organization, ranging from success to just overall visibility of the club?
You want me to go?
I'll let you start.
All right. Hugely important. Look, there's no doubt. I mean, I think back to the World Cup in '94 and what that did for this league. Obviously, the foundation of the league, really, as it was mandated in the award of the World Cup to the United States. And, what that has meant to the league has been terrific over the 30 years of its existence, but now we have an opportunity to accelerate that growth even further. I think there's just going to be so many eyeballs on the sport. There's going to be so many eyeballs on this country, and Major League Soccer has to be able to take advantage of that, as do all our clubs. And we're incredibly excited about the programming that we're going to be able to put in place around that. And I think to be able to capitalize on what is going to be an uptick in interest in the sport is a great opportunity. I think that comes both on and off the field, right? On the field, more players will get exposure to what's happening over here and to a lot of the good things that have seen this league grow to being a top league globally. So I think there will be added opportunity to bring quality players to this league across the country, which is terrific. But off the field, there's no doubt we don't have enough fans as a league. We don't have enough fans. We don't have enough people coming to our games. We don't have enough people watching our games. So we need to drive that. And I think an opportunity like a World Cup, when so many people are watching and the focus of the entire soccer world is on us, that's an opportunity that we can't afford to let slip through our fingers. So it's hugely exciting. It's also a daunting task, and it's something we have to rise to and make sure that we take advantage of it fully.
I think the only thing I would add to that is, I can wear two hats. I can wear the SoFi Stadium hat, which is an amazing opportunity for us at KSC to host 8 matches, including the U.S. opener at SoFi Stadium next June. I think the one thing that I think is an amazing opportunity for American soccer fans is we have become inundated with friendlies and Premier League visits and every team coming here, but they're playing exhibitions. And then we get Gold Cup. This year we got Club World Cup. But I think it's great for our fans to get to see all these amazing teams, but not at their peak. And when you get to the World Cup now, you're going to get these matches with players at their best, at their peak, coming into our venues and showing that skill set. I think that can grow the fan base in soccer in the United States as a whole. It has become a hotbed every summer for visiting clubs, for competitions. You saw it this summer with both the Gold Cup and Club World Cup kind of competing on both coasts. But I think it's going to be for our fans who are used to seeing great players maybe at 80% of their potential. This is going to be them at 110% of their potential. And I think that is going to help elevate what people see the best and most competitive soccer. And hopefully that translates into great viewership and fandom for MLS moving forward.
Just to follow up, if I may, does that, based on what you had mentioned earlier, Pádraig, does that mean that there should be an expectation that there might be an increase in spend on the squad just because of the fact that there is more visibility with the World Cup?
I think you can look at it in multiple different ways. I mean, I'm sure teams will look to do that depending on the level of talent that's available. But I see this as more an opportunity for players to come over here and just see what an incredible environment this is to play the sport in. There's no doubt about the league's growth over the last few years and how quickly it's become a top league. I know they use the idea of a destination, right? A destination of choice. And I think that's what we've become. And to Kevin's point, these players are coming over now much more frequently with their clubs, but they're now coming over in a really competitive capacity. And I think they're going to be able to see the incredible stadiums, the incredible fans that we have here, and what it's like to play soccer in this country. And I think that's going to be incredibly appealing to a wide swathe of players across the world. So I think an expanded World Cup as well also produces more opportunity because, again, countries that don't often have the chance to play in a World Cup, they're going to be here. They're going to experience their first World Cup here, and that gives us an opportunity to recruit heavily as well and look to bring in better talent.
Thank you.
Kevin, nice to finally meet you. Pádraig, I'll rather than doing the unrelated 2-part question, I'll just focus directly on you. But over multiple coaches now, we've talked about the type of players that the club's trying to come in, and you've also talked about how coaches adhering to your guys' game model and what the Rapids as an organization looking to do. With how you mentioned that Chris did a good job of matching that game model of kind of living by that philosophy. Is that something that you're reconsidering? Are you reconsidering how the next coach will have an impact on players, or do you guys still have the same belief in your game model and just kind of the structure of how you guys bring players in?
Yeah, I think the game model is there and clear. I don't think the game model is anything that's overly, unique. But we do want to be an aggressive, front-footed team. At the end of the day, fans are coming to watch our team play, and they want to be entertained. And I think that's really important to us. We want to put on entertaining, attacking soccer, and we didn't do that maybe to the level that we would have liked, but that's not going to change. Entertainment and attacking football is very much what we're looking to do here. And I think some of that comes with being a front-footed team. That also plays into the advantage that we have from an altitude perspective. We need to have opposing players and clubs coming in here just knowing that this is miserable to play against the Colorado Rapids here, that they're going to have to work harder than they have to work anywhere else. And I overheard a comment by Zoran Canerta from Charlotte FC talking about just how miserable it was here. And obviously they lost last year, or during the 2025 season here. But that's what we need it to be. So we need to stay on the front foot, and we need to make sure that we are aggressive in our approach, and that we have a team that's young, that's hardworking, that's committed. So that's never an issue for us. But we have to add that tactical nuance then, because I think you will see more and more teams sit off against us, more and more teams that are just going to wait to try and hit on the counter-attack. And your ability to break down a low block is obviously something that is becomes much more important in those type of situations. So I think about Orlando last year. I think about Austin. I think about Kansas here, where I think we had the largest XG spread of any game that a team has ever lost in the league's history. Those are points that would have seen us in the playoffs. But again, they're points that could go towards turning us into the top 10 contender that we're looking to be. So I think you'll see consistency there from that perspective. But again, it's nuanced improvement that we really need to make sure we're getting here, because ultimately we're driven to go to the highest levels. We need to get to a point where we're not just finishing on the cusp of the playoffs, but that we're pushing into that top four and making sure that we've got a home field advantage for the playoffs as well.
We will go back to Zoom with Keith Richards.
Hi, Borg. Nice to speak to
Keith.
you again. Nice to meet you, Kevin. With just missing a coach, there's a lot of things we can't control, particularly with players who came to play with Chris. Is there any opportunity you had to speak with some of those players like that, and any assurances made that the team is still on the right foot and you don't want to lose any of those core players that we have already?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Keith. I think I got it. So if my answer isn't right on point, please let me know. But as soon as the season ended, we spoke to our leadership group. Obviously, you have player meetings across the board. The fact that our two are in the championship final or the Western Conference final on Sunday has kind of delayed some of those individual meetings. But we did meet with the leadership group as a whole. And I think what we were clear with them, and what I was thrilled they were very receptive of and really bought into, was this idea that where we finished this year wasn't good enough, that wasn't good enough, and we needed to hold ourselves accountable to that, and we need to push on, because there is enough talent in this team to reach much higher levels than where we ended the season with. So I was really encouraged, to be honest with you, Keith, that there was a real sense of determination amongst those players and a commitment to come back in the best shape that they could possibly come back in, and really ready to go to prove that this team is absolutely a playoff team and a team that can compete over the next few years. So that's not something I'm concerned about at all. I've had individual conversations with some of that group as well, and they'll continue over the next couple of weeks. But I know we've got a young core that is absolutely capable of anchoring contention over the next few years, and they're driven to do so. And it's one of the very top things about our group is that character, mindset, and mentality. Now we need to continue to drive that forward.
Matthew Wick with Pitcast. Kevin, good to meet you. Pádraig, good to see you as well. You talked about the Nuggets as an analog to the Rapid situation. Currently, with the letting go of Mike Malone, you also let go of Calvin Booth. I think in the coaching search, you might have aptly described the Rapids' own Eric Boucher as a potential in-house candidate. But I do want you to put on your historian hat and your researcher hat, and for you to answer in a supervisory scope, and then Pádraig for you to answer in a responsibility scope. There have been three constants over the decade: the ownership, the leadership, the results. The results being a 37% playoff hit rate and an average finish of 16th, including our second in the MLS outlier season. What is going to change
to get better results? And why is Pádraig and the current leadership going to choose the fourth coach and expect something different?
I think it's a very fair question, right? And Pádraig and I discussed this. If you were to ask me, do I believe that kind of leadership should get to choose 4 coaches? I would answer truthfully, no. I don't necessarily, if you looked at it under the same microscope. That being said, I've been in this role roughly 18 months. I've had the chance to work side by side with Pádraig and immensely respect his belief in where we're headed, his respect throughout the soccer community, and ultimately the vision for the club. I can only judge off my 18 months of where we're at. And so I view this as this is our first opportunity to go in together and to go build the team, the coaching staff, and the organization that we're capable of. But I think, look, let's be honest. The organization missed the playoffs. It's not just Chris Armas. It's not just the players. We all missed the playoffs. And I think we have to take a hard look at ourselves and understand how we make it different. Pádraig talked about the losses against non-playoff teams, but ultimately we weren't good enough as the Rapids as an organization to make the playoffs. And I view organizations as a series of opportunities, right? And do you take advantage of that? Coming out of the League's Cup, we had momentum. I felt we didn't meet that moment and that opportunity going into the playoffs last year. This year, I thought we had plenty of chances to kind of catch that upswing, and you felt it right after, even after the transfer of Georgie, the upswing. We didn't meet that moment, and certainly at the end of the year, we didn't meet that moment. I think this is about us looking introspectively across the club and saying, where do we need to get better to meet those moments? How do we find the coaching? How do we find the people? How do we make sure these results don't happen again? Because what you just said is what keeps me up at night. We have amazing teams in this ecosystem. There is no reason the Rapids should not stand with titles and as a championship contender the same way all the other teams are. Now, there are reasons, I think we've talked about this, very different leagues, very different systems. When you look at, to me, when I look at KSC as a whole, there's shared DNA between all of these teams that are at the peak, right? If you want to look at the Rams, it's a draft and develop model and then spend when you get there. And whether you want to talk about an Aaron Donald, a Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, and then when you get close to go push all in to go win a Super Bowl. I think when you look at the Nuggets, it's draft and develop. Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray. When you get close, you go push and you get those extra pieces to go win a title. The Avalanche, same thing. If you look at Cale Makar and Nathan McKinnon, Arsenal, Bukayo Saka, Miles Lewis, Skelly, we could go on and on about draft, develop, grow, and then when you're close, push. But I think for us, MLS is not built that way. There isn't the draft and develop model that we have honed in on all of our other teams. I think that partially explains some of the differences in the inconsistencies. But I think for us, we have to come up with, and organizationally, what is the model that is going to make the Rapids successful? How do we invest in it? How do we stick to it? And how do we build a long-term plan for that? And this is my personal viewpoint of the Rapids in that history, is we've chased a soccer system, a lot of different paths over that time based on how do we make the club more relevant? How do we make it more exciting? How do we get people in the building? And how do we play competitive soccer? I think first and foremost, our job right now is how do we build the best roster in the short term and the long term? How do we invest the resources, the vision to go do that? Because here's the truth. One of the things I think we do at KSU pretty well is be innovative. And if you chase what everybody else is doing, you're going to get the same results as everybody else. We have to come up with what makes the Rapids unique, what is our competitive advantage, and what are we doing that our peers aren't doing? That, I think, is what is upon us, the next coach, and this organization to go develop. That is what changes the history, right? Ultimately, ownership has given us every opportunity to go succeed. How do we go meet that moment? How do we go meet that opportunity? How do we raise the expectations for our fans that this is going to be one of the best clubs year in and year out? That is the only goal that we should have for the Rapids. And to me, when I look at the ability, I have full confidence in Pádraig to partner with us to do that. But it is up to us to both A, develop that model together, B, give the support, and then hold accountable. I think from here, we are all accountable for the results that this club has. It's not about 2014 through 2025. It is about 2025 moving forward. And are we doing the best job for our club, for our fans, and for our city?
Pádraig, what do we have? It's November 26th, I believe you have to make the roster decision. Do I have that right? Okay, so given that, what's the timeline for hiring the head coach and then having that new appointee be involved in that decision-making process? And then Kevin, for you, given a number of people at the club, possibly maybe the new head coach could be in a contract year in 2026, what does accountability and performance review look like for you overseeing the club? Thank you.
So yeah, a lot of the decisions, as you know, Matt, like we keep some of those to ourselves in the lead up to that because we think they can still be assets, and that's obviously been proven true in the past years as well. There are a couple of things that we're happy with. Maxu's going back to, or happy to disclose, I should say. Maxu's going back to Europe. He may obviously go to the Middle East as well, but he's leaving at the end of his contract. And I think, as you all know, we've got a couple of guys that are free agents as well who are going to explore their options. I think Ollie really wants to look at what his potential is in Europe. And he obviously has every right to do that. Ollie's someone that we highly value, obviously, as a local kid who's come up through our academy. They're the type of players that as you all know, we like to keep here. I think the second team as well, and the fact that they are in the Western Conference final on Sunday, some of those decisions are obviously going to come after that, or at least the announcement will come after that. So we're working our way through it. I think we have a clear idea of what we're looking to do, who we're looking to bring back, but yeah, you'll have to stay with bated breath until that's made public.
I think to follow up on your question about what does accountability look like, are we on plan, right? Are we meeting the goals that we set forth? Part of that's going to be new coaching style, the roster, or the expectations. But to me, it gets back to the same goal. Are we getting better to compete for a championship, or are we not, right? To me, that is the metric point of how you look at it. And by the way, I don't view that as whether you're in a contract year or not, has nothing to do with whether you're meeting the standards of this club, of the organization, of ownership, and the fan base, right? Those should be viewed each year on, are we getting better or are we getting worse? And to me, this year, I thought objectively, we regressed, right? That's how you get to the decisions you get to that we're talking about today. Moving forward, I never think it's a line in the sand, hey, it's making the playoffs, it's hosting a playoff match. It's, do you credibly believe that you're getting better and building hope amongst your fan base? Our one job as an organization not only is to win games, but to deliver hope to the fans that they're going to see a championship product. And to me, that's one of the great measures when you look objectively. Do your fans think you're getting better? Are we progressing? Can we tangibly point to why you should be optimistic about supporting the Rapids? And I think that to me those are the metrics you're going to look at every year. Contracts are not.
Yeah, for both of you guys, with the early success of Denver Summit and the attention that they're likely going to capture within the state, obviously, ideally, the most ideal outcome would be for both clubs to flourish and to succeed in coexistence with each other. But what is the club doing? What is KSE doing to ensure that the Rapids don't fall behind?
Yeah, I think I've said this before, like this market is absolutely more than capable of supporting two teams, and it's great to see women's professional soccer here in Colorado. I think we're all excited about that, but I think for us, it's staying focused on what we're doing. I think a lot of the things that Kevin's talked about in terms of building out that plan and making sure that we're executing against that, that's what's going to put us in the position to succeed on what our vision is and what we're looking to do. So I think for us, that remains the key element here. So I think we've obviously brought Haley into the building, who's done an incredible job and really built a lot of buzz and excitement around it. And you're going to see so many things change as we go through the next kind of 12 months. And there's things that we're going to talk to our fans about in the upcoming fan forum as well. But it's about being very clear about what we are trying to achieve and then being absolutely diligent in executing against that strategy. So I think the focus for us remains the same. It remains on doing the things that we need to do to put our club in a position to achieve the goals that we have.
I think to follow up on that, their success is our success. I think our success is their success. The growth of soccer in Colorado is what's paramount. We will be their biggest fans. We are their biggest fans. We have tremendous relationships. I mean, you can start with, Rob Cohen is the owner, is our patch sponsor at the Avalanche, right? This is a fairly intertwined group as you look forward. But to me, I think you're going to see a lot of things that are going to seem, as we go forward, coincidental, that as we've looked at the club over the last, certainly as I have over the last 18 months, as Haley's come on board and looked over the last 4 months, some of the changes we're making that I think we need to make for the club are regardless of what the summit is doing, right? How do we focus on ourselves and get better and be in the position where we need to go be the best Colorado Rapids we can be and compete in the MLS. We're not competing in the NWSL. We're not competing against the Denver Summit. We are competing against the Western Conference and the rest of MLS and how we get better. And I am excited to see the growth of soccer continue to happen, to see how we can get better on our own, and to push ourselves to have that competition, to be like-minded, to say, how do we become one of the best teams in Denver? How do we go compete for market share with everybody? And I always say, like, it's not about looking down the street. It's truly about how do we get better? How do we deliver for our fans? And how do we deliver in the realm of MLS? And that is where our focus is going to be. But I view the summit as only ancillary and positive to everything we're doing here.
We have a few questions on the Zoom, so we're going to go through those first and then come back in the room. Mitch?
Hey guys, Mitchell Coe here with Commerce City Radio. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can, Mitch, yeah.
Awesome, thank you. This is sort of based on some of your guys' answers to some previous questions, but if you're talking about the opportunity upcoming with, getting exposure with the World Cup cycle and looking around the KSE ecosystem of other teams, you see a lot of large spending in terms of whether it's contracts, transfer fees with Arsenal, et cetera. No one's expecting Raps to compete financially with Arsenal, but do you think with, open coaching and a kind of chance to sort of reset the franchise right now that it is maybe time to increase spend, whether that's through a coach or some high-profile players to bring into Commerce City and sort of elevate the club that way? Thank you.
So I think, Mitch, we've got proof of concept, I would say, of that, earlier on this year with the acquisition of Paxton Aronson. I mean, this is one of the top young American talents globally. Obviously had an incredible club in Eintracht Frankfurt, Champions League club. I think for us to be able to go out and secure him on a club record transfer fee just showed the commitment that's there to building a group that's capable of contending. And it goes, there's even more than that, like going after players like Manyomo, who's on the fringes of the Colombian national team, bringing someone like him in, Rob Holding, who's obviously been at Arsenal and played in some of the biggest games and at the highest level. I think that again shows the commitment that we've got here to putting a competitive and winning team on the field. So I feel that that's very much in place. And again, we've got to make sure that we're bringing in players that fit the group we have, that fit the style of play that obviously the coach is looking to have at his disposal, and ultimately build a team and a roster that's going to go and compete. That's what we're looking to do. But in terms of making those signings, I think over the last 12 months, that's been proven that there is a commitment there to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll certainly follow up. I thought, for us, when we looked at the ability to bring in a Paxton Aronson as kind of a foundational player and what that can mean and show the commitment of the club, those are the players you want to try to go acquire. But I also think, and we all saw the MLS salary release, over the past week, there's no correlation between spending or winning in the MLS, right? There's a team below us in spending that just won the Eastern Conference. So I think when I look at it from the point of investment, it is how do we invest in the people, the facilities, the process that is going to help us go win, and then where can we accelerate in the right areas? It's not just about spending for spending's sake. It is truly about building a philosophy, an identity, a core competency that no one else has, and continuing to invest in that model to drive forward. And I think that is the very difference of what we need to identify with the next coach as we sit down and evaluate the club is there's a chance to invest, but we have to make sure it's something that is defensible to only the Rapids, that can't be copied, and ultimately that can lead to our success, not just fishing in the same pond where everybody else is fishing.
Thank you. We will move over to Alex Labadou.
Hello again. You guys mentioned Paxton. Obviously, at his end of the season press conference, he mentioned that he felt like he wasn't being utilized in the right way. How do you guys sort of maximize what you have in him? And then, that's my question. Sorry.
No problem. Yeah, look, I had a good catch up with Paxton before we went back to the East Coast, and I think it's a really interesting thing. Like Paxton is such a versatile player that I think you could be hard pushed at times to say exactly what his best position is. I mean, this is a guy who can play off the wing. He can play as a number 10 in a 4-2-3-1, but he can also play very effectively in a 4-3-3. And I think this is going to be something that obviously the coach will be looking at, or the new coach will be looking at. How do you get the best out of Paxton? Because that's the key question for us. He's undoubtedly an incredible young talent and somebody that I think is going to just continue to get better and better. So what we're looking at ultimately is how do we put a group around Paxton? How do we complement what he brings to the group? And how do we make sure ultimately that we've got a full team? Because this isn't basketball, right? This isn't where one or two players can really make such a huge difference. Like football is a little bit different to that. So you've got to make sure that you've got complementary pieces and that you've got a roster, ultimately a useful 16 as we talk about, that can go out there and compete day in and day out. So I think with Paxton, you know, he likes to go and get the ball. He likes to be able to go and make the game. And that's something that was afforded to him when he came here. But certainly we will be making sure that we're building a group, building a roster, and building a framework that puts Paxton in a position to ultimately reach his max potential and be a top player here for many years to come.
All right, next Zoom question from Juan Fernandez.
Hello there, can you hear me?
We can, yeah.
Hey there, good afternoon. So my question, it's been roughly 8 years since the Rapids op-ed. The dynamics and that leadership structure has changed quite a bit. I mean, even the landscape of the playoffs have changed, right? And while there has been some progress, notably in the youth pipeline, you know, it's the perennial playoff team status that still seems to, you know, evade the team a bit. Are those, you know, you speak a lot about expectations and following through. Are those still expectations the fan base at large should hold this leadership to? And if not, are there any other expectations and kind of goals set forth by one Mr. Kevin Demoff that he may want to, you know, revisit and change when it comes to that transparency side?
Look, this club should be competing for titles. Full stop. I think that is the goal, that is the challenge, and that is what we wake up every day doing. It should be no different from any teams in our system, and this club is no different. The fact that we haven't had success should not lower the bar for what success looks like for this club. This club should be competing for the MLS Cup year in and year out. And I don't think anybody in this organization will stop competing until we get to that point. And that, to me, is what our fans should expect. That's what ownership expects of us. That's what I expect of this club, and I think that's what Pádraig and our staff expect.
Yeah.
But I think with that comes the accountability that we have to be willing to live up to that. And it's easy to say that at these press conferences today, at the end of the year, and then come up with reasons why that's not the case moving forward. But if we want to be the club we're capable of being, we should be competing for the MLS Cup year in and year out in a way that is authentic to the Rapids. It's not copying what Inter Miami does. It's not copying what LAFC does. It's not copying what San Diego or Vancouver or anybody else does. We have to come up with what makes the Rapids special, what makes the Rapids different, and what is our competitive advantage that no one else can claim. That, to me, if we build that correctly, we'll be competing for MLS Cups year in and year out, and that's what the fans should expect, no less than anything else of our other teams.
Right, we will move over to Dwayne from DNVR.
Hi, guys.
Hey, Dwayne.
I was wondering if you could speak to the new coaching search with what are the specific KPIs and measures of success that you're holding this new coach to, and how does that balance with contract length in an effort to maintain some sort of stability within the club so that current players and new players who are looking for a club might find that lack of inconsistency that we've had recently, you know, as a reason to come join this club and stay here?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about how best to frame this maybe at the start. I mean, I think for the last two coaches, if you look at Robin was here for 4 years and Chris, you know, was obviously here for the 2 seasons, which is very much in line with the little bit over the average from Chris's perspective, or from Robin's perspective, a little bit under from Chris's. But it's certainly something that we strive for. Obviously, you want to have a coach that comes in, Kevin talked about Coach McVay obviously at the Rams, and to build something like that is obviously something that we aspire to, and that'll be very much on our minds as we go about this search. And I think that's something that ultimately we will be driven by identifying somebody that shares the same values that we have, that is driven in the same way that we are, and that has the same expectations that we have, and bringing in somebody who very much becomes a part of this. I think Kevin said it when he mentioned that we missed the playoffs. The club missed the playoffs as a whole. We want someone who's going to come in and be a part of that, be a part of this club as we go after the titles that we've talked about. And that's something that is going to be key in this process, is looking for someone who fits that bill ultimately from our perspective. I think in terms of the specific KPIs, like that's not something I'm going to necessarily mention here, but we talked about what we're looking for in a coach. We're looking for somebody who can connect with the locker room, who can connect with the players, who can build relationships there. We're looking for somebody who's going to come in and bring the level of standards and accountability that's required to hit that ultimate goal of winning titles. And then we're looking for somebody who's going to come in and bring a tactical nuance and a tactical ability that will ultimately to get the best out of our players. And I think it's the combination of all that, allied to the work that we're going to be doing behind the scenes, that will ultimately enable us to build a team that is capable of going out there and winning titles.
All right, and then the last question here from the Zoom. Keith, go ahead.
Yeah, just maybe one more question regarding the coaching search and maybe the roster construction. I guess you mentioned a few times that the core of the team is something that you are really proud of and think is good. What if there is a coach who doesn't exactly meet your expectations on the core of their roster and maybe wants to change a little? Is that really a breaking point, or is the team prepared to make some tough decisions regarding players they like if they have their perfect coach?
Always prepared to make tough decisions. That's certainly not something we're going to shy away from. I think the good thing is that the coaches that we've had conversations with thus far are very much in agreement with the way we see it as well. And they truly believe that there's a good core here. And I think it's one of the reasons why this is such an appealing job, and why we've had so many people reach out to us, and then so many people that we've reached out to be willing and wanting to come into this process, is because there is a good core here. And I think normally when a team is switching coach, they're in a much tougher situation than we currently are. I mean, this is a team that missed the playoffs on goal difference ultimately. We feel like it underachieved relative to the talent that's here, and that it certainly was a strong playoff team. I think our results over the course of the season, beat Vancouver, beat San Diego, obviously had good ties with LAFC, Seattle, home and away. I think we've shown we're capable of going toe-to-toe with the very best in this league. What we've got to do now is do that on a more consistent basis, and ultimately, rather than just go toe-to-toe, beat them. Like that's ultimately what we're looking to do here. And I've been really, really pleased with the conversations that we've had with coaches so far, and with how they view it too, and how they're seeing it. And as I said, we think we've had a lot of really top caliber coaches in these conversations, and we're going to continue to have more conversations over the next days and weeks, with the viewpoint to bringing in the right person so that they can be a key part of the final roster decisions before we put the team on the field for next year.
Yeah, the thing I would add to that is when you go through coaching searches, you always go in with one perspective of your team, but it's always great to hear what other people's perspective of your team is, right? And then usually there's truth somewhere along the way that you don't want to admit that people will poke at and get to. But I think it is a give and take, right? And someone who walks in and says, your roster's great, shouldn't necessarily get the job. And someone who walks in and says, your roster sucks, shouldn't not get the job, right? There should be, what is the vision for the roster? What is the vision for the club? And how do those two things meet? And I think if you do a coaching search right, there has to be a vulnerability to how people see you and can criticize you, that you're willing to get better, right? Ultimately, this organization missed the playoffs. We're not perfect. The roster is not perfect. We need people who can come in and credibly address the shortcomings while also seeing the positives in the club as well. And we have to be able to hear that feedback and process it in a way that makes us better and help support the next coach moving forward. But it's always one of those things. And look, coaches are coaches. When they evaluate a roster coming in, what they think from afar to what they actually see when they start working with players is usually very different, right? They can watch on film, they can talk to counterparts, they can understand, they've played against you. That's where they develop all their opinions from. What happens when they actually sit down, talk with players, work with them in practice, That is ultimately going to be when they truly get a better understanding of what they have in front of them and that what needs to push us forward.
Madigan, if I may, I'd like to follow up on the first question to get an answer from Pádraig, and then Kevin, I have a separate question for you. So Pádraig, just to reframe.
Why do we got to keep doing this? Can't we answer the same question?
Sure. I mean, you can chime in on this one too, and Pádraig can chime in on the next one. But realistically speaking, this will be the fourth time you've pitched the same values and perhaps out of your control under the same resourcing. How, if all things are the same, can any coach be expected to come in and raise the tide given those constraints, and how will the team attract that coach?
So first thing I would say is all things are not the same. I think that's clearly been articulated today, that things are not the same, and we're getting to kind of lean in on just that wealth of experience and expertise in this area to augment what we have here. So that is different, that is tangibly different. And I think in terms of attracting coaches, like, we're not having any difficulty with that at all. Like, the caliber of coach that are interested in coming to this league as a whole, but also coming to this club, cannot be overestimated. It is a very, very strong group. And I think that speaks to where the league is as a whole, but more importantly, it speaks to where we are as a club and where we are as an organization. We're part of the largest sports group in the world, and that's a sports group that has had success across the board. And I would venture to say that, yes, we haven't won the title that we want to win, but we have had positive steps, just positive steps. The 3 playoff appearances, 2 Champions League appearances, there's movement in a good direction. We have a lot of good young players coming through. But again, to reiterate what Kevin said earlier, we missed the playoffs this year, and that's not good enough. And that requires the vulnerability that Kevin mentioned, and requires us to take a really hard look at what we're doing. But those are the tough decisions that, as I said to Keith's question, we're not afraid of looking at that, looking ourselves in the mirror and seeing what has to be done here and how we have to make this better. But I'm just very excited right now about the prospects of what's to come. Like, over the last 18 months, we've started to really paint a picture of what is possible at this club. And now we're very much, finalizing that and now putting in place what needs to be done and what we need to execute on to get there. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us. It is different. It is new to a certain extent. And I think we're going to bring in a coach that's going to be very, very much put in a position to succeed here at this club.
And then, Kevin, your bespoke question now. I want to cite your words from a recent interview on September 20th with the Denver Gazette. You said, to see the excitement around the Broncos this year, and since their ownership change, is amazing. I think the stadium is the next step to helping transform an already amazing franchise. I think it's a great credit to Greg and Kerry that everything they said they would do, they've done. And more importantly, how quickly they're able to execute on a vision. Whether it's a training facility, now a stadium, and certainly a competitive team, it's been spectacular to watch. Given that assessment of the Broncos, what is your assessment of the Rapids, and how can you change, as the now apparent face of KSE, a largely antithetical approach to this team, this stadium, and this city as to what you just lauded by the Broncos?
I would challenge the statement that this has been an antithetical approach, right? I think it's been an inconsistent approach, and maybe that does make it antithetical to some degree. But I think one of the things, and this is not about me, right, but the change in KSE as we've built it now is, how do we share the best practices and resources of all of our clubs to the benefit of knowledge? How does Pádraig be able to pick up the phone and call Ben Tenzer and John Walls and Chris McFarland and Les Snead and say, hey, I've got a question, how to pick your brain? How does he pick up the phone, talk to Rich Garlick at Arsenal and say, hey, how do we share these resources? Our goal is to make that interconnectivity better. And I think if there's one thing that's probably fallen short here, is the team build model for MLS has been different than the team build model everywhere else. How do we bring those closer into alignment? But, I see a lot of conversations about what this stadium is, right? I've also been here and watched a full house for the U.S. men's national team, a full house for the U.S. women's national team. The stadium is perfectly good enough if we deliver a great product, right? That to me is first and foremost. No different than Ball Arena is 25 years old. And we have plans looking at renovations the same way we have plans looking at renovations here. But no one has criticized it because the teams have won consistently and people show up and they love those teams. That doesn't change us, by the way, from looking this year at the fan experience at Ball Arena, whether it's food, merchandise, pricing, experience. How do we make it better? That same laser focus comes to the Rapids as well. Now, I will tell you, in Portland, I have spent as much time on the Rapids in this new role as I have any other club. And maybe that hasn't been good enough to get to date, but this club has the full attention of KSE. I think there would be no greater point about the power of this entire ecosystem than the Rapids winning the MLS Cup in a full building here in Commerce City, right? That shows what we can do collectively together to grow as a unit. And I think the one thing, I think the Broncos have done an amazing job with Greg and Kerry and what their vision is. The NFL is very different in terms of the economics of how you go build a stadium, what that means, where the Broncos are at, what you're competing at, shared resources and parity. For us, but when I look at the NFL and I look at what the Rams have done, not necessarily the Broncos, we found our own path that people criticized at many a point. They criticized us when we hired a young coach. They said you can't trade, multiple first rounders for stars and win. They said if you do that, you're going to wind up falling off a cliff right after the Super Bowl. We've done none of those. We consistently find a way to innovate. I think we've done that at the Avalanche. Today, Martin Necas signing a new contract, solidifying that trade and moving forward. What the Nuggets continue to do, what Arsenal has done. I think when I look at KSC now, it is in a very different place, hopefully, as an entity that shares resources and pulls across than it has before. But look, that is just talk, right? If we want fans to trust us, as Rapids, we have to deliver from a Rapids premise. It does not mean anything to the Rapids that the Nuggets, the Avalanche, and the Rams have won titles, or that Arsenal's competing. What they want to see is progress here, progress in Commerce City. That is what our fans have to see, and we don't deserve that trust until we deliver upon it, right? This is the beginning. That's what all of these press conferences always are. The truth of the matter is people have to hold us accountable from here. Can we deliver upon what we're saying? Can we make this place a fortress to play in? Can we pack it with 18,000 rabid Rapids fans and maybe a few LAFC fans when Sun comes, right? But ultimately, those things are all within our control. Whether we deliver upon them, that's what people should hold us accountable to. That's what we're holding Pádraig to. That's what we're holding Haley to. I think that's what Stan and Josh are holding all of us to. But to me, there are the benefits of KSE. I can see from a Rapids standpoint where people say those have failed to translate into success for the Rapids. That's fair. That's an honest criticism of what has happened. I don't think it's because of resources. I don't think it's because of attention. But whatever the reason is, it hasn't happened the same way it has at the other clubs. We have to collectively, as an organization, change that. That's what keeps me up at night, is how do we make this club one of the standards of MLS? How do we bring it in line with Arsenal and the global clubs of the world and use that power? How do we bring it in line with our other clubs? But this hopefully is a start to building that trust with those fans. But I can say we probably haven't delivered on our end of the bargain, and people should hold us accountable for that. Where we go from here is up to us collectively, and I hope people will join us for that journey because I think it's going to be a spectacular one. But I truly think that it is fair to say, when can we be that fifth pillar of KSE that is in that mindset? Is how do we live up to those standards? I hope our fans hold us to that standard because that's what we hold each other to. And when we talk about, going back to the question of what are the standards here? It's women in MLS Cup, full stop. How do we get there? How quickly we can get there? And how do we do it in authentically our way? There are no shortcuts to winning, right? And I think that's the hard part when you go through a couple of coaches, you go through a couple of systems, everybody's looking for that instant success. True winners are built over time. And that's not preaching for patience. That's not preaching, for long term. What that means is you have to have a vision for the next year, for 3 years, for 5 years, and consistently execute upon that. And I think that's what fans should hold us accountable to as we move forward, but I'm excited to get going.
I think I might have been thinking of my question too much because you kind of touched on it on accident there, but I've only been covering this team for 6 years now, but seeing the effect that Sun had when he came in at the LAFC, and obviously every sporting decision is going to be made about fit and what it can do for the team. But just with Denver being so diverse, with what we've seen from fans who show up for Liga MX and for some of the CONCACAF Cup games, just from that 30,000 foot view, just how much in your mind is there, if it exists at all, just the idea that if there's a chance to touch into the Denver community, to the diverse community that we have in Denver, and bring somebody that can really bring out a new set of fans, a new, people that have kind of been untouched in the Rapids before. I mean, is that something that has crossed your mind? Is that something that you think can enhance, kind of the Rapids culture? If there's something you could do to kind of, bring kind of a new flavor? I mean, obviously you guys have touched well with the U.S. men's national team, but just has there been any internal thoughts or discussions about just the potential of bringing in a player like that can have such a big impact?
I think the answer, I appreciate you didn't direct that to one of us, so it's maybe the first time. But you were looking at me, so I'll take it. Look, I think the answer is absolutely but. If Haley and I were sitting here making the decision, we would sign the most popular players and pack this place. But ultimately, it has to be the right fit for the sporting side, and it has to be the intersection of, are you getting the right players at the right point in their career with the right trajectory to fit in with your roster? And does it fit into your team build? Again, there are no shortcuts to success. Signing a player just because they're going to fill the building does not make the Rapids better. Might make the bottom line better, does not make the Rapids better. I think every decision we make from a sporting side has to be what makes our team better. How does it fit in? Because ultimately what's going to pack this building is winning. And I think that, to me, do I get, excited when I see something? Look, I live in LA too. I split my time, right? I can see the impact is, but there are very few players like that. I think when you go chasing relevance, you usually wind up missing it. And truthfully, where you start is, what do we need to make this club better? What does our coach want? What does Pádraig want? And is there a player who fits both from a marketing hat and a team hat at the same time? And that's what gets you excited. Look, when we moved on from Georgie, it was not immediately that we were going to fill it with Paxton. That was an opportunity that came pretty quickly later. But you get excited about that because it checked both boxes, right? A young, dynamic player, U.S. men's national team, who also fit the vision for what we want to be for the Rapids, right? And you saw the fan excitement around that, from the jerseys to people coming out. That's the right signing. Finding someone just because they're a name, I think that leads you down a path that ultimately, I think, steers you away from building that foundation and being different that I think we're talking about here.
All right, we have time for just one final question here. Brian, go ahead.
I didn't know that was going to be pressure like that. I'm Brian Jennings, also contribute with Burgundy Wave. This is for both, of course.
Yes. How about for neither?
This is going to be for me, just a comment. I like where you're leading in here, because my question is, the guys out there doing it day in, day out, have to win the points in the, in the table and things like that. And I like what you said. Is there anything this year? And I'm not looking for individuals or certain players, but what were some hits? What were some misses? That you see going forward that we need to work on? Does it need to be a little more better finishing? Things like that. Do we need to be a little more stout in controlling midfield? Whatever it is. Thank you guys, by the way.
I'll go first on this one. The misses are collective. And I think we've said that, throughout this, we missed the playoffs. We missed the playoffs as a whole. And that ultimately over the last 12 months, starts with me from that perspective. We didn't do enough, clearly, to get over the line and to get into that position. So I think that's where I would look from that perspective. In terms of the hits, I think there's plenty, to be perfectly honest with you. In particular, I look at Darren Yappy, and I think we'll find out pretty soon, but I'm hopeful he's going to make the under-21 national team camp. I think he's certainly done enough to get into that camp, and I think his progress over the last number of years, again, epitomizes what we look to do here at the club. Good young local talent that we can develop and turn into a real productive player in this league. And at 20, about to be 21, he is somebody who is really now taking the steps to the next level. So incredibly excited about what he's done in still limited minutes, 1,400 minutes. That kind of goal production, double-digit good goal production, really, really good. And I think you saw against LAFC, everything about everything that's good about Darren, his ability to play in open play, but then his ability to get into the box and finish a really high level opportunity from that perspective. Then I think about someone like a Zach Steffen, who I think was much maligned last year, and incorrectly so in our viewpoint, but I think about the year that he's had. And again, he's someone that I'm always going to resonate with because of what he does off the field as well, and just how good he is in the community and how important that is to him. But real top-class performances against Costa Rica in the national team, hugely unlucky to get injured before the Gold Cup tournament, but I think re-established himself very firmly as one of the, if not the best goalkeeper in this league. And then I think we also saw the emergence of some of our young players, outside of Darren, and just genuine progression in some of those guys. And I think that was good to see as well. I think some of the guys didn't maybe have the season that they had hoped for, but there's still progress there. And I think that's a key thing that you have to be able to look beyond. I'm also going to think about Paxton. Look, Paxton came in, tough moment, right? He's coming in late in the season into a new team, but boy, did he hit the ground running and show glimpses of what he's capable of. And I think he gives us a real foundational piece in exactly the way we want it, right? A 22-year-old, 21, 22-year-old national team, domestic player who really wants to be here. He wants to be here and he wants to be the main man in a group that goes on to win a title. And I think that's a real positive for us as a whole. And then for me, I just continue to be incredibly grateful for the group that we have here, the people that you don't necessarily see out there on the field, but I think we've got a tremendous, young, talented, hardworking group here as a whole throughout the organization that are doing a lot of the hard work that may not be seen, but it will come to fruition over time. And that's something that, again, I'm incredibly grateful to be surrounded by those people on a daily basis. But I don't think you have to look far, Brian, to be honest, to see some really positive things in that group. But you also have to always sit there with the understanding that we didn't get to where we wanted to get to. And what are those tough decisions that we have to take now to go and take the next step? But lots of positives from the year as well.
All right. That is the end of our media availability today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Pádraig, and thank you, Kevin, for your time.
Thanks, everyone.